our team and so thankful for you spending some time with us to go through OpenAI and how you can make it real within your business. And that's really how we're looking at this event. There's a lot of people playing with ChatGPT, with AI platforms. And our goal with this event is for you to understand how you translate that into success within your business. And that's why we're starting with business cases that drive into examples that then go into demoing some of those examples and go into talking about how you get started in those approaches. We really want this to be a practical situation, that this is meaningful to your specific business. So we're going to start by talking a little bit about our presenters, making sure you understand who we are. We want to connect with you. We want to get your questions. We want you to understand as much as possible about how you make this real. And I'll just start by introducing myself. So I'm Nathan Lesnowski. I'm Concurrency's Chief Technology Officer. I know a lot of you on the call here. I've met many of you. I've been in Milwaukee for about 20 years doing consulting at Concurrency. I'm a 13-time Microsoft MVP. I have 8 children, and one of the things that I also love to do is I love to do triathlon. So I'm a Ironman 140 triathlon finisher at Ironman Wisconsin. And I've also learned that my kids love it too. And I think one of the things that has been really exciting in my career and as a father has been experiencing what it's like to learn and to do something new, and also to know that you don't know anything. You don't know everything. You don't know everything there is to know. And in triathlons, what I've found is that I'm not always the fastest person. And I just kind of have to be okay with that. And why that's relevant for now is because we're going to be presenting some content today that we've learned. That doesn't mean that we know everything about this. It doesn't mean that we've learned everything there is to learn about OpenAI or AI technologies, but we've had the opportunity to see this live and in production at customers. We've had the opportunity to be able to bring this to the table in ways that are really exciting. And our goal is to share what we've learned and what we know as a result of being able to do that. And hopefully it's an opportunity for us to learn more about you, your unique business, what makes you special, what helps you to be successful in what you do in your business. And when you bring those two things together, some really awesome things occur. Some really awesome results happen within what we've seen in our customers and the results that we can drive by bringing our knowledge together. So our goal is just to be sharing this with you and make it an opportunity for you to be able to learn some of the things that we've learned. And hopefully we then have the opportunity to learn from each other. I also want to introduce Lewin. Lewin, just give it a shot. Talk a little bit about who you are.
Sure. Hi, I'm Lewin Long. I'm the principal architect here at Concurrency. I'm also 9 times Microsoft MVP in this particular place, right, in a Windows development space. I'm also a speaker, a developer, tinkerer, and for me, right, a lot of why is more important to me than what and how. What and how we can figure it out. We will help a lot of people figure out that's what we do, and that's what I like doing anyway, right? I also wrote a book once. Funny enough, I won't recommend people to write books. It's an intense thing. That said, right, I would rather actually go to play with IoT and make my own lawnmower, right? The thing that you see actually on the screen that's moving around is actually beginning of my lawnmower at one time that we built. Put a robot frame and then toss a lawnmower in the middle of it, mows my lawn for me, right? I'm also a tinkerer, like I said, right? Look at the car that I was driving, there is a self-driving feature on it, but it kicks out once in a while, put a water bottle in it, right? Make ways to improve a situation safely, of course. That's what I like doing. I enjoy playing with these new technologies, and there will be some demos we'll be doing for you guys later today. Looking forward to these things.
I think you should try to productionalize that lawnmower, Lewin. That's a really good idea.
Yeah, right.
All right, we also have Alessandre. He's our lead data scientist. He also happens to have the coolest picture of all people at Concurrency.
Oh, thank you. So I have a physics and mathematics background. I'm a physicist turned data scientist. Really interested in writing and developing NLP systems, and especially with large language models. Been following large language models since they were not cool. So it's very exciting to see it coming on the mainstream, especially with the breakthroughs in this technology in the past year or so. Also really interested in time series and ML ops. ML ops is just a really fancy way of saying I really like to take machine learning models and push them all to production. where an app gets to consume those results. And I'm also a chess enthusiast. So for those of you who like to play chess, reach out. Let's get a game going.
Thanks, Alessandre.
Thank you.
And then our last intro today is Mac. Hey, Mac.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Matt Kravitz. I'm one of the senior developers here at Concurrency. Day to day, I really enjoy full stack development. I play one of the roles in integrating applications here, especially with data models. Really enjoy it all throughout, just seeing things come to life, right? So it's very gratifying, in my opinion. I really enjoy my day to day. And I am a big Formula One and motorsport enthusiast. So if you're into that, you're welcome to hit me up. So we'll have a chat.
Awesome. Thanks, Mac. Okay, so when we think about that group that just introduced themselves, I think it's important to talk about that group, because what we found as we started to pursue these kinds of engagements and we've seen success in customers is that it takes a team. It takes a team of successful people to make this successful. It takes your knowledge, it takes a developer, it takes a data scientist, it takes a project manager, it takes a team of knowledge to bring that to the table. And when we look at the types of results that we're going to be talking about today, we think about driving two things. We think about driving new revenue. We think about driving operational savings within our customers. And that's the opportunity that this is really bringing to the table in a very practical and concrete way in the success that we're going to be showing you. This is complemented by readiness for the cloud, readiness for the modern workplace. But what we're really trying to drive into here is this symbiosis that exists between the apps that you build, the experiences that you put in front of your customers, and the ability to leverage data to drive new experiences that create either operational savings or new revenue for those same customers. So this is the slide I want you to remember, is that there are concrete scenarios that are driving value today in your company. Take what your company does, how you deliver your mission to your customers, and think about how AI can enable that mission to your customers to be extended in a way that brings more value to those customers. And these are some of the ways that we're seeing this live in production today. One of the most expressive examples we're seeing that customers and the relationship between those customers and the business transform is in customer service, request automation. The idea that I can take an experience that I'm having with a customer and transform the way that I'm interacting with that business by delivering value faster for them via artificial intelligence type chat experiences. And I'll show some examples of that in a minute. That kind of experience is one where I can create experiences that have less friction, better results, better ability to promise, better responsiveness, better ability to answer questions for a customer when they need it, how they need it, and oftentimes asynchronously. Same kind of scenarios exist in situations like order status. Where's my window? Where's my truck? Where's my delivery that's coming? Where's the product that I wanted? This ability to answer a question for a customer in an accelerated pattern that complements the capabilities of humans. Same situation here with sales quoting. The ability to take an ask from a customer and to transform that ask into something real back to them is something we're seeing live with customers today. The ability to take that even complex request, I need X, Y, and Z combined together to turn into something that is real for me, is what ChatGPT type capabilities are really enabling for us. This scenario here, data mining, represents, I think, one of the biggest opportunities that really came about as a result of people exploring ChatGPT. And again, ChatGPT really is something that was trained on the whole internet in a sense, but what it wasn't trained on is you, specific to your private information. Where a lot of customers are coming out of the woodwork right now is they're saying, look, I got these scenarios that my business runs on, but I need to tell something about that business. I need to communicate what's special about me to a tool that has the ability to answer those questions. How do I do that? How do I mine what's special about me and provide experiences for my customer or internally that represent that and provide a Q&A experience against it? Whether it's machine manuals for boats or trucks or it's scenarios like, I want to know about what the right time of year for our business is, or I'm curious about where to go to get certain things from the HR organization, or I need to know about what the scenarios are associated with my different plants. I can get that from Q&A based experiences. And this last one is around invoice processing automation. This idea that I have these parts of the organization that do these repeatable tasks. Anytime you have these repeatable tasks, it's an absolute opportunity for you to apply AI, especially when those tasks scale. When you have a lot of them and there's a high degree to which they are repeatable, if you can teach it to act based upon a complex set of information, things like invoice processing become amazing opportunities for things like GPT-based models. And this is just the start. This is just the start. We have 15 plus customers we're already talking to on these models, many in production that are tied to these kinds of ideas. This is a fantastic opportunity to take this from a science experiment and make it real in your business. This is tied to then other types of models. So these are things we just talked about here. GPT-based models tied to interpreting information from a customer. That can then even fly into even more complicated experiences that provide even more value. So like this idea of sales quoting or customer service might be part of a smart product. So imagine you have a smart lawnmower or a smart snowblower, or smart truck. That experience can be part of the smart product that you enable for your customer, the smart garage door opener, the chat-driven experience, the asynchronous ability for you to integrate with that individual and provide experiences back to them ties right into those crossover opportunities that then even fly into where some of our earliest AI projects that we did at Concurrency well over 5 years ago were not in the chat space. They were in the automation of supply chain ecosystem, the idea of taking a look at the ratio between inventory and demand and supply and trying to optimize that. Goes all the way back to ability to promise. When you have a customer service request, where's my delivery? Where's my truck? Where's my window? All flowing back from some of these other challenges you might be wanting to surface. You can see how like these light bulbs start to light up where I can not only solve one scenario, I can even integrate that into other scenarios where systems talk to each other. That's where this explosion of AI, this train that we all have to get on board with, enables us to be able to deliver really unique opportunities for our customers and really competitively puts us in a really interesting position. So this is an example of a lumber company where they work with contractors, and these contractors need products delivered to their work sites. So example of this in ordering case is, what if I gave that contractor a more intuitive experience where they can interact with the same way that they would interact with a person in the shop? A lot of these contractors, they're very, they'll call up, they're waiting on hold, they're trying to get a hold of someone, they want this wood or different elements delivered to their job site. What if I gave them an asynchronous experience? I'm not waiting on hold. I have an app, or I have a chat experience. I ask for 40 pallets of 2x4s, well treated, delivered to my site. A bot can take that information. A intelligent experience can take that information, create a new order, package that into order number X, delivered a quantity, delivery date. And then on the right side, putting things like creating a new order, canceling the order, getting a status on a refund, or doing a complex order from something like a PDF, providing them an intuitive experience. What we're seeing is that there's a percentage of people that want to interact over phone. There's a percentage of people that want to interact over email. And we have scenarios that are starting to serve that. And then you have another set of people that are really attracted to these asynchronous type experiences. So this is a really interesting starting point. Now, why does this work? And especially, why did ChatGPT take off? Well, one of the reasons it took off is because it delivered two things. It delivered an experience which was satisfying to a customer request, customer or any kind of request, really, a satisfying experience. Why was it satisfying? It interacted with us in a way that felt normal-ish. It felt more normal than the sort of bots that we've experienced for the last 2 or 3 years. You know, the bots that are like, hi, I want to order something, and it gives you like a menu, and you click on things in the menu, and that is okay. And oftentimes for me, that's more satisfying than waiting on hold for 3 hours, right? For an experience, or waiting for somebody to call me back if I can address it asynchronously. But it wasn't truly a satisfying customer experience. It felt like sort of semi-satisfying in the sense that I can answer pre-trained things. But in this context, ChatGPT really was a satisfying customer experience, and it succeeded at answer retrieval. It delivers value from the answer retrieval. So the question that this then bears is, what if I use this to do the things that my business needs to do in this context? When my customer has a request, can I deliver them a satisfying customer experience through chat, through email, but instead of having a human serve that need, have a bot serve that need, have an automated AI process serve that need, or accelerate the human in their tasks? This idea that the customer request comes in, I provide them a satisfying customer experience, meaning the chat experience or this email experience is satisfactory to me, or maybe even better than satisfactory. And then it starts to address this need of answer retrieval. And that may be something that's simply been trained on, or it might be at reaching out to a business system and retrieving information like, what's the status of my order? When is it arriving? Who do I escalate to because I'm not happy about it? Or I want to order this particular product. How do I get that product ordered for me and expeditiously as possible? What's it cost? How do I get that information as quickly as possible so I can include it in a conversation? Imagine if I'm sitting here having a conversation with a buyer and I can chat that and get the answer back to them right that minute versus having to spend the 30 minutes calling a person to be able to answer that question. That's really where the transformation occurs. It's this combination of speed and accuracy that can be built into headless models. So combine that into answer retrieval, bring that then into action taken. Maybe I need to cancel something. Maybe I actually want to place that order. I can drive that straight into actually interfacing with that business system again. And then if I'm truly having trouble, pulling the entire line of conversation into an escalation with an actual customer service rep. In many cases, people who can use the same interface. Oftentimes when we're starting these kinds of projects, this person is the one we start with the experience. We arm the customer service rep with the bot experience to get their answers faster, and then drive back to providing satisfying customer experiences to the customer themselves, maybe even giving them direct access to the same tooling. So, this would be an example of that as well. The idea that I'm using a query-driven experience. What can I help you find? And then providing the customer or the customer service rep with an intuitive experience that's driving responsiveness and information back to them that answers their question very directly, gives them what they need, and then allows them to escalate based on that question. If like, maybe I'm not happy with this order date here. Maybe I'm missing, maybe number 3 is missing. Continuing through that chat experience, then potentially driving into a human experience is something that this is really advancing. I'll give you, an example of a flight that I had. I had a flight that was canceled. It was all messed up. Orbitz has a really great chatbot where it starts to drive into a chat experience, can answer me, then drives me into a personal experience with the actual human without ever losing my communication that I did before. That's really where these succeed, is where you take that information, you drive it forward into a next stage. So this would be, an example of what I'm trying to get across here is this idea that your business has a set of language that is unique to you. And it means something when you train a new employee. It means something when you interact with a customer. And what has always been a challenge has been training more employees, scaling those employees, managing the quality of the response from those employees, delivering great success back to those customers based upon this complex request that you have, whether it's something like metal or windows or cars. Like this bottom example is really fascinating. It was a great use case for this. My 16-year-old is getting added to my driving insurance. Like, oh man, like I'm not excited about this, right? So she's getting added to my auto insurance. So I call up the auto insurance rep, and I'm asking them questions like, how much is it going to cost to add this person? First, I had to sit on hold. Then I'm talking to this person. I'm like, how much is it going to cost for me to add her to my policy? He doesn't know. I have to give him a bunch of information. He says he'll get back to me in a couple of days. He never calls me back. I have to call back again. You have this sort of terrible customer experience. And I am not alone in having these kinds of terrible customer experiences. This is the kind of thing that companies try to avoid, right? This situation where a customer needs something, it's relatively repeatable. It's something they should know. They can't get it back to you. It frustrates them, turns them from a positive to a negative customer. Perfect example for a chatbot. I would have loved it if I had an asynchronous conversation, put it into a chat, tell me the answer. I'll give you the driver's license ID, this, give me the answer back. Same with the situation with these windows. Same with the situation with any other product. Lumber was the one we used earlier. This idea that I can help the individual to get their answer more rapidly. Even if it wasn't me, maybe let's say I even called in and that person put it in a chatbot. They could have given me the answer faster. So this idea that your business has a specific language. Your business has the ability to use these capabilities to take any one of your processes and make it more capable for your customers is really where the transformation exists here. So in order to make that happen, there's a lot that goes into these requests. You have to train it. You have to understand what it is you're actually asking questions about, whether it's lumber or it's metal or it's trucks or it's whatever the use case is. All of these elements of this request become different pieces of the AI model that the AI model has to answer for. What we found is that the technology has advanced to enable us to do this faster. So an example of the interface, even for a lumber scenario or a metal scenario or a truck scenario, is I got a request even via email. A lot of companies have this. I was talking to a drywall company, same kind of situation. They get requests from email, that request comes in, interpret that request in a sidebar, extracts the information, creates the quote for me. So talking with a lumber company, talking with a drywall company, this ability to take that request, turn it into extracted information, generate a quote, accept the quote or modify it, and send it back to my customer in a rapid fashion is game changing. It's game changing for them. This idea that I'm taking something very nuanced that I do, that's unique to my business, that's unique to the language of my business, and I'm either driving new revenue in this case, or I'm driving better customer experience in the customer experience case, and I'm doing something real, is where this real value is actually happening. The idea, I was talking with, there's a customer that we were talking with where actually a relative of mine was trying to order something from their website, and you get connected to like a middleman. And the experience of them going through that middlemaning process, so like this dumb form to a middleman that does the quote, is terrible. It's a terrible experience. And I said, hey, wouldn't it have been better if you had like a bot that you could have interacted with or something that created a better experience? You're like, yeah, like that would have really transformed my experience. And that's more of a satisfying customer experience as well. So what we found in that example above, and this is what's so awesome right now, is that the initial version of that we did with a customer took us 9 months. And that was very early on. That kind of goes back to how long we've been doing this, right? This is not the cool thing of that. The reason I feel like this is not only our moment, but it's the industry's moment, is that we've been doing this before and we got high accuracy before doing the same thing that I just talked about. But it took 9 months to get there. And it took 9 months to get to 80% accuracy. And that's because we needed a tremendous amount of data in order to make that happen. I remember starting that project and it was like, okay, we need like 30,000 emails. It's like, okay, we'll figure this out, but we need 30,000 emails to do it. Next iteration of that, we used some open source AI capabilities running on Azure Kubernetes services. It took about a month to do the same thing that we did in 9 months. That's currently in production with 300 plus users. That uses the email interface. The next iteration, we start pulling into things that are amazing, like pointing to solving a PDF translation problem. Like we were only able to pull things from email before, like the email body. Now we can pull it from PDF, turn that into the body, and actually solve that problem. The speed at which that we didn't even do any tuning to be able to achieve that outcome via the PDF translation. And what we're going to talk about now, as we start going into some demos of some of these examples, is Alessandra is going to talk through a little bit about what did we do to solve that particular problem without even doing a substantial amount of training. So Alessandra, why don't you talk a little bit about what we were doing with text turning into a table, and then what we did with using this PDF ability to pull from PDF and how that changed the game in this example.
one thing that's unique about generative technology that us in the NLP community didn't quite have before is the reliability of taking unstructured text and predict or apply semi-structure to it. If I have an order, let's say I want to order 3 products and I write it down, it's hard to even, it used to be difficult to even answer the question, how many products do I have in this order? And this problem is a problem that we encountered with OCR systems. So this example that we have on the screen now is an invoice. Now you can see that invoice is very well structured. And for a human to look at that, you can know right away that there's 3 items. Another caveat about this invoice is that it was sent to us via image. So it's not even at a PDF level where there's some textual information. It's just an image. So in OCR systems are quite reliable at being able to take an image and pull the text out. But as you can see, the output of the text that was pulled from this image is not structured. And so the next step is, okay, generative technology can apply structure to unstructured text. So as a proof of concept, we took this text, as you see on the screen, and prompt a GPT model to create a table. And if you see now, the table now has the very same structure that we saw on the image, where there's very well-defined 3 products. And so if we go to the next slide, here we have a GPT-enhanced OCR system, meaning we have existing OCR technology that can pull text from either PDFs or images. That text does not have to be structured for us to reconstruct a structure that is useful for the rest of any software system to take and to its ultimate conclusion. And how we solved the problem was, as Nathan mentioned, we already had an existing system that could understand emails. The problem is the OCR systems weren't preserving the structure that you find in emails. Now a GPT solution here clearly solves that problem and allows us to take this, plug it into the rest of the system, and having a working solution pretty quickly.
Awesome. Thanks, Alessandre. So I want to touch on a scenario that builds on this ability, which is the data mining scenario. The thing we were talking about just a moment ago was the idea of pulling customer requests, customer scenarios, responding to quotes, getting answers back to customers. Those are very narrowly focused conversations with a customer. So I want a thing, give me a thing back. You can start to train on that. What starts to get more complicated is when the set of data that you're asking questions about becomes broader and bigger, but the value that's attached to that from a customer's perspective can be even more consequential and more satisfying. So let me give you an example of a story. So there's my car, for example, has a light come on in that car. Well, I have a manual for that car, but I look it up, and inside the manual, it's like, well, what does that mean? And it's very kind of generic understanding of what that light coming on means. And it's something about filling some liquid. I'm not exactly sure what that means. So I end up calling this, I couldn't figure it out from all the different manuals that I have. End up calling this place, and they're like, well, you just fill up this certain lubricants, and you can just do it. Go get it at a Fleet Farm. And you go over to Fleet Farm, you get this liquid, you put it in there. It's like, is this the right one? I'm calling them on the phone. I'm trying to figure this out. It's not really in the manual as I wanted, or I can't even find it. And I end up trying to have this really frustrating experience trying to answer that question and to be able to satisfy what I needed to do in order to be able to kind of go on with my life. And that example is something that repeats itself across a lot of different industries. Think about any kind of product that you would buy that has a manual, probably one that you don't even have anymore. Snow blowers, the lawnmower that you have, how do you replace the cable in it, how I put new what's the mixture of oil I'm going to use within my my chainsaw? What's the situation that I've got with my boat? This light came on. I need to put lubricant in. What the hell is this? Like all these kind of questions that we have that come up. It's a perfect example of data mining. It's where I have this data already. I have an understanding of this data. I need to create a way for my customer or even my internal employee taking a phone call to have an ability to be able to find that information and respond to my customer in a more complete, more satisfying way that gets them to their answer faster. Imagine in that car scenario or board scenario, or me just trying to fill up the right oil in my chainsaw, if I could chat something and it provides me the answer that I need. That's truly where this sort of satisfying customer experience comes in. If I can use data to be able to solve that, I have another company I'm talking to where they do knee replacements and other kinds of human body replacements, I guess you could say. And there's maybe you don't want to hear this, but there's flaws in those, right? There's problems with them. There's things that happen with them. They have known issues that they have to address. And when these issues occur, they need to do pattern matching. They need to be able to figure out what is happening in one that matches to another. So the scenario they're looking into in the data mining use case is, how do I match those use cases? How do I find one that happened in the field, match it to one that happened 3 years ago that no one else knows about, match those together, know I've got an issue, and bring it back to engineering. This idea of data mining, serving customer requests or internal needs and providing value back is really important. So this is an example of that same use case. I have a X24 code in my F-150 truck. What do I do with this error? I'm confused and looking at the manuals. No problem. What this basically means, you need to replace your spark plug. If you don't want to do it yourself, go to these particular locations. Estimate part costs, truck history. This same example happened. I was talking to my mechanic. He's like, if I had this, it would be gold. Like, just the mechanic having this would be gold. He would love this because he half their life, I didn't really realize this, but half their life is just pouring through manuals and online forums and things, trying to figure out how to fix things that they don't see very often. The ability to serve those use cases and help them to be able to address them faster, and then maybe even bring it back to the stupid consumer like me, enables a transformation of that experience. Data mining represents, in combination with customer requests and sales requests, one of the other most important scenarios that we're seeing from customers. So to talk a little bit about how you train a system, let's go back to that kind of first conversation of the unique thing about all these use cases is you. You can take ChatGPT, you can put ChatGPT in front of someone, and it delivers value because it's been trained on the internet, right? It has answers from 2021 on the internet. It can deliver that value. But what it doesn't know is you. So what are the ways that we train a model on you to enable these use cases we were just talking about: customer service, sales, data mining, etc. So I'd love for Alessandre to just kind of walk through each of these scenarios and talk a little bit about what these mean and how we use them. And then there's a kind of +1 on this by integrating into other tooling called cognitive services. So Alessandre, why don't you just kind of talk a little bit about that?
Sure thing. This is almost like a 3-tier approach of solving a problem using this technology. And it goes top to bottom, the fastest way to get a result to something much more evolved, which is at the bottom. So the first process is prompting, and people are coining the prompt engineering now, which is true. It is at the art of just taking a model with no fine-tuning, no training, nothing, just the base model, and prompt it in a very specific way to get it to do what you like it to do. So if your problem case can be solved by just prompting, that is the fastest thing that can be done. Following the next step is using of embeddings. So we're finding that, as Nathan mentioned, the ChatGPT on its own is not enormously helpful if you have to have knowledge over anything that has been published after June 2021, or if it needs to have knowledge on data that is not publicly available. And this can be HIPAA information, this can be PII, this can be your own private information. And in that case, we would need the easiest way to sort of get to a minimum viable product would be the use of embeddings. And embeddings, you're taking an out of the box model and you're basically teaching it how to read your own document, and then to use it as context. And we'll have a demo of this very same workflow later in the call. And the last one is fine tuning. The fine tuning means you take this very large model that's been trained on all of the internet, but it hasn't seen everything that you have that is private. And it may also not to be really good at something very specific. So for once, if I want a model to know specifically how to read manuals of Windows and being able to know its dimensions, it probably won't be able to do that super well out of the box, but that's where fine tuning comes in. Fine tuning allows you to take all of that computational power and hone in into these hyper-specific tasks that you need. So building a high-performing system would require then either one or a couple of the fine-tuning models to do very specific things, and then you chain them all together and you have a robust system that way. And the way we sort of approach these problems is precisely this way. We start simplest first. If prompting solves it, then great. We don't have to go any further. Probably most likely the use of embeddings will be needed, and then if that solves the problem, then we're done. And then the final sort of go-to workflow is fine tuning.
Awesome, thank you. There's also a fourth capability that relies upon integrating systems. And one of the most interesting things that was just talked about is integrating the OpenAI models for the direct knowledge response and prompts to more complicated sets of other data that might exist in files or even databases using tools like Azure Cognitive Search. So you see an example here where we're asking a question about are out-of-network providers more expensive than in-network ones? And as a result of this, we're answering the question. You can see we're answering that question, but we're also providing citations. And this is a use case that can be very powerful in the data mining scenario where, say, I'm seeing this light in my truck. What do I do about it? You could say, in response, this is the most likely thing that you should be doing based upon the information that we had. And here's where I got that information if you want to read further. In some use cases, that level of specificity and accuracy is good enough. In doing a quote for a customer, it might not be. And that's where maybe additional training might be necessary. But in these kinds of use cases, maybe just providing the best way to find those documents in the first answer is a tremendous value to the customer. So you can see here where the app UX is tied to getting questions from both a open source model, maybe fine tuning it, and then combining that with additional information that might come from cognitive search that supports it in the same kind of conversation. So there's a lot of options here. This is a space that's accelerating so fast, and it brings the value of not only even data that's very sort of file context, but even data that might exist within business systems that we're pulling into the response that's going back to the customer. So we're going to start with two demos. One is going to be Lewin and Mac, and they're going to be demoing an example of using OpenAI to be able to serve a sort of customer configurator scenario. And then Alessandre, following that, is going to be talking about how to get started and walking through also an example of training a model with your company's specific information. So Lewin, why don't you grab the screen and you can walk through the example of the configurator.
You first? Yes, sure. Hey, Mac, just making sure, do we update the plugin for Outlook ready?
Yeah, everything's all set.
Okay, thank you. Right, let me stop my screen share. Let's go to this one. Can you guys see my screen?
Sure can.
Perfect, right? We're gonna talk about Windows today a little bit. This is going to be the sample that you saw a little bit earlier in the context, but all based on Windows, right? What I ask Mac is about a little plugin that we wrote. This is actually on my Outlook, live Outlook email. I sent a question to myself, right? That says I have a rough opening of X and Y dimensions for a living room windows. What options do I have? And I'm going to see if I can bring up a ChatGPT-like demo coming out from response from there. So in this case, right, we actually got a website. I'm going to minimize this now. You don't need to see that anymore. We actually have a website that is running ChatGPT-like bot. Windows Analyzer bot, right? That's running. It actually goes and look behind the data and look for the question that we actually sent. And not only does it give you a most definitive response, right, that most people would like, meaning most efficient economic way to fill that space, but also render the window out for us, right? That's because we also have the graphics for the actual windows. Now, when I looked at this window, it's not appealing to me, right? It's like it looks kind of like a prison, so I'm going to say that, right? With two smaller windows on the side. And let me see. Oh, now it actually asks contextual questions that comes back to me and say, hey, do you live in a particular area? Because depending on the dimensions, right, there are limitations on what we can do with the windows. It knows that. So we're going to say I am in Miami. Let's see what it comes back with. All right, that's much nicer looking. I find that it's a little more opening for us right now. And at this point, right, I would say something is missing. Like, it's too plain. It's too plain. Can you make it with lines on the window? That is postal look. So, when we say put lines, right, somebody could actually say, hey, I want to go with the colonial look and put a bunch of lines on it. Remember the prison statement that I made earlier? It actually could remember that and say, hey, what does it look like? Oh, that's not bad, right? It actually figured out that I am not making it have too many grills on here. I'm actually looking for a particular, smaller set, right? Like looks a little more cleaner look. So it actually could figure out the contextual as well. At this point, we can do something like, I like it, right? I like the look now. How long will it take if I use hey. Now it actually hits a different system altogether behind the scene. In this case, warehouse management, etc., and figure out that something like this might take a little longer if it is actually done in black because it's the popular color. If it's written white, it's saying that I can get it sooner. White. Hey, I like the look of white better. Right? At this point, it can actually move to a different bot and take over to a ordering bot and so on and so forth, right? So it actually moves from one bot system to another, and actually conversation continues. That's the towards the end of the demo. I will switch it over to Alexandre.
I'm not sure what's more impressive there, Lewin, the chat experience that's interpreting what you're doing and putting it into the actual 3D image or the 3D image itself. But you can see how that's something very practical that a contractor or even a person at home might be dealing with. Just awesome. Nice job.
Thank you.
All right, Alessandre is going to start talking a little bit about how to get started.
Okay. Let me get the screen here. Please let me know when that's up.
Got it.
Okay. All right, so this is getting started with OpenAI. Say you're interested in using OpenAI in your private Azure subscription. These are 4 steps, and the steps are pretty similar, regardless if you're trying to set this up on your private Azure subscription or in an enterprise account. Of course, with the enterprise account, you're going to have a couple more security things around security, but the core of it is the same. So the first one is you do have to apply for Azure OpenAI with Microsoft. And this is what the application looks like. It's about 20-some questions. And you have to have information about what region of Azure you want your resource to be in, and details about your Azure subscription. And I would like to post this application here in the chat just so that everyone has that. So let's say you're done applying for the search service. Now, the next thing that you have to do is you provision the Azure OpenAI as a Azure resource. And I will go over what that looks like. But it looks like exactly how you would provision any other Azure resource. And then number 3 is it's left to you to integrate the Azure OpenAI service into your preferred Python development tool. I will show you an example in Databricks. Databricks is amazing because it handles all of the enterprise connections you may have, and you're never memory limited in how much data you have to work with. You can have petabytes worth of data. Databricks will be able to ingest it, do whatever you need to do with that data. Azure Key Vault, of course, it's the for secret handling and the storage accounts. That's the bare minimum that you should have to get started. So I'll go over these 3, and on the 4th, I'll actually on Databricks show how we created, or how you can create your own GPT-powered custom QA on a document of your choosing. And if you notice, this slide is actually on a live code environment. So we're going to do this live, fingers crossed. Before we go, here's a resource group, what it looks like, okay? So when you have the OpenAI access, and this is something that caught me by surprise, so I'm going to show this real quick. When you go to create it, it looks like anybody can create this. But what you'll soon find out is if you don't have your application, if your application is pending, you will not see a pricing tier option. And that's how they sort of block everybody from being able to resource that. So I just wanted to show that really quickly. But the star of the show is this resource. So this resource is only accessible to people who have the secrets. So only people that have access to this resource group are able to open this Azure resource. And the keys and endpoints are right there. I'm not going to open that, but the endpoint and secret keys that you need to access your own private instance of OpenAI is right here. So now, how does Microsoft handle us having our private access to these models? One really interesting way of showing that is there is an Azure OpenAI Studio. And this is like the no-code, low-code offering by Microsoft. So for those of you who have worked with Azure Machine Learning has a portal just like this one. So it might be a little bit familiar. And let's go on ChatGPT-3 Playground. So here we have a number of models that we can call. And note how these models are not the GPT-3 base models. They are our own private copies of these models. And I can actually go and pick any example here. Parse unstructured. We were talking about parsing unstructured data, so let's do that. It actually telling me DaVinci is better than Curie for this, so you can do that, and you can actually hit generate. So if you don't have access to ChatGPT in your organization because it was blocked, this is how you enable GPT-like capability private to your organization. If you have if you like to experiment with HIPAA or PII information, you haven't been able to do that before for a very good reason. You can't just paste that information into ChatGPT and expect that information not to be leveraged, or there's no guarantee of that information not being leveraged. Well, with this solution, we are calling our own copy of our own models so that the communications are within the Azure resource. So let's go to deployments, and I can even show you how to deploy a base model. So this is to create a new deployment. And let's say I want to spin up a DaVinci 2. I can do demo-DaVinci 2. And it's already spun. So we have now our own private copy of DaVinci 2. And then when we want to test it, we can go demo text DaVinci 2 and test how it works. And this gives you a really nice initial playground to sort of find out what's possible. And then to finalize how the data management works. So you can connect this to a storage account, and whatever data that you upload to an OpenAI resource for training stays in this file management portion of the resource. And then the last thing, you can even fine-tune models through here. I would recommend doing it through a live code environment. Actually, everything I've showed you here can be done through a live code environment. But when you can create a customized model, you get to choose whatever flavor of base model you want to fine-tune on, and then go through this process, and it's going to create your own personalized model. And the model, the custom model will reside here. And then the deployment is the same step. So the studio makes for this very friendly interface to be able to sort of see why is it that we can send information that we private to you to this resource. And the reason is because we have our own copies of these resources that the only people using it is the people on the resource group. Okay. So great. So I got that started. So what does it mean to get this started on a code environment? So I went ahead and already connected everything. I will not take you through that painful process. And I have a demonstration of how could you ask ChatGPT-like questions on information that ChatGPT or that GPT-like models have never seen before. So first of all, I'm going to use two models for this demonstration. That is the DaVinci 3 and the Ada 2. Now note that this code, everything works seamlessly. So I can swipe, I can take a different completions model, and I can take a different embedding model, and I can test whatever combination works for me without really changing my code, which is nice. So here's a really simple QA implementation. So this is nothing but a function. I throw a question in there, it formats it for me, and it sends it as a question to a completion model. So let's go ahead and test for accuracy. So the first question I'm going to send to this is, what is the largest country by land mass? Okay, that is factual information. Great, really accurate. Next, what is the largest country by population? Largest country by population is China. Okay, that is factual. And the next is, when was the spy balloon first spotted over American territory? So let's try this one. October 44. So
Wait a
what is
minute.
happening? Yeah, exactly. What is happening? So people are talking about what they're calling hallucinations by generative models. Hallucinations means I asked something of the model and it came back with an answer pretty confidently that is incorrect. But they're not really hallucinations. We can actually track this back, why we got October 44 here. First of all, this was a loaded question. This pertains to the. I chose this because I would be surprised if most people did not hear about the Chinese spy balloon incident we had earlier this year, right? So I really wanted this information to be something that everyone knew, and it happened in 2023. Now, Da Vinci 3 has been trained on the entire internet, but only up to June 2021. So what happened with 1944? So then I started doing a little bit of Googling. This is the first Google hit I got. Like, okay, well, this is getting interesting. This was behind a paywall, so I didn't get to read the article. But then right away, I get some clues. There's high altitude balloons, and there's World War II. Great. So then the second Google search I did for more specifics, I found this. So I learned something this week. The Japanese first operational launch of a using high altitude weather balloons to deliver bombs to the west coast of the United States. And the launch was in 1944. So it wasn't a hallucination as much as we asked Da Vinci to give us an answer. Da Vinci did not have the proper information to be able to correctly answer my question. And so it just did its best. It sort of guessed. And it guessed pretty well. It made the computations that weather balloon of weather balloons and sightings in US soil. And there's a mention of US soil, and you can see how this goes. All right. Good news is that we are aware of this problem, and there are things we can do about it. This is a new function now with safeguards against guessing. And basically, I did nothing to this function except answer the question as truthfully as possible. And if you're unsure of the answer, say, I don't know. So we can declare this function. Go, great. Sorry, I don't know. So this tells you that if we're having a problem of hallucination with this technology, there are ways to define cutoffs for when it needs to give you a response versus when it does not need to give you a response. There is ways to compute a confidence number in between 0 and 1 and decide on a cutoff depending on applications. So think about a medical application where the cost of guessing something incorrectly is much higher than having an answer for everything. In that, you would make the cutoff really high. But then for something, but then you probably lack staff for something like customer service. Okay, so now we're great. So how do we get Da Vinci to be able to answer this question to me? Well, I need to incorporate data, and I need to incorporate data that Da Vinci has never seen. All right, so how do we do that? So the example we're going to use today is current events. Now, note that you can do this with anything. This could be product manuals or any text data. You can do this very same thing. So how does this work? So you have a question, and you have a group of documents that this question may have the answer form. You pass both of these to an ADA model. And think about an ADA model like a reader. So an ADA model would then read through all of your documents and create what we do call an index. Then ADA would also read the question and create a representation of that question and search in the index for where that information might be. Then we can build a new prompt, a prompt that contains the relevant information that ADA was able to retrieve from your documents, plus whatever you want to do, plus whatever that your question is. That can be fed into DaVinci. And then hopefully you'll get an answer that's a little bit more useful than without your documents. And that's sort of the flow of using your first attempt at using an embedding should very much look like this sort of workflow here. All right, so we need to choose what data must we use as additional source, because the data has to be representative of the knowledge you want your model to be able to address. So in this case, there's a Wikipedia page precisely on this event. So what I've done is I've gone to the Wikipedia page and I scraped the text off of this, threw it in a text file, and then used that with ADA. Okay, now there's about 100 or so lines of Python here that I would rather not go through. I will certainly answer questions if you like, but just for the sake of the presentation. So now there's a new function that we came up with. It's answer questions truthfully with Wikipedia. So we kept the truth. Prompt. So if he doesn't find it in the context, he will not answer. So we can try this again. Okay, that's better. From the 28th to the 4th. Then we can also, just for testing, can ask a couple other questions. What was the spy balloon's intended destination? And Hawaii, okay. When was the first balloon down by US Air Force? February 4th, 2023. And how high the balloon was when it was down by the US Air Force? 60 to 65,000 feet. So I think the takeaway here for this demo is GPT-like models is a very good tool to enable you to be able to have some sort of a chat or question answering system based on your private information or based on information that is not private, but is very painful to go through. So, and one example that comes to mind is a TV that I recently purchased. I just had a very specific question about how to mount the base. Nothing was included in the package, but a website was like, oh, great, there's a manual there. The link had a couple hundred manuals. So not only I had to find the manual for the specific TV, but then I had to go through a couple pages to find the answer to the specific question. That's the thing that would be great. This technology would be great for. And yeah, and the context can be any sources of any documents that you have.
Awesome.
I think there was a question. All right. The question I see is, what was the original prompt? Okay. So the original prompt was, where's my functions? They're here somewhere. Not that one. Apologies. There it is. So basically, whatever I write in this function ends up in this part right here. Can we search custom images as well as or just text? That's a great question. GPT-4 is actually multimodal. So GPT-4 accepts not only text, but it also accepts images. And so there's no reason why this capability cannot be extended to also include images. How do you keep the index up to date? Can it accept incremental updates? That's a great question. Absolutely, you can keep it incremental. So let's say you indexed 500 gigs worth of information, and then you have another 100 gigs that you have to add. You don't have to You don't have to index 600 gigs. You can just index your additional data and add that to the current collection of the index. Also, I remember a question about training data. Same thing goes for these models. They're all inline training, meaning that you can gradually train them as more data comes available. So the question is, how does ChatGPT handle information that may disagree about? How does it handle contradictory information? That's a great question. So let's say if you have contradicting information in your document, how that gets handled. I think at this point, the way the embeddings work, it will be about volume. So if your question pulls 10 indexes, you have 9 indexes that says one thing and 1 indexes that says another, it's gonna go with the sheer volume. So that's how it would work on embeddings in a way.
Is that an example, Alessandro, where the confidence would drop and you could use that?
Yes, that's a very good point. In the same way that we can ask how confident a Da Vinci model is for something like it not having training data for, if you have conflicting information in your training examples, the confidence number will be inherently smaller. What is the cost model for development? I think, Nathan, you have a cost slide coming up, correct?
Yep, we got a slide on that.
Okay. Oh, yeah. So we're going to have a slide about costs, and we can go into a little bit more detail too, if you like, about costs when we get to that slide. Oh, and I think one last question, this is really great. What if the information that you've already indexed changed? Then unfortunately, you do have to go and index only the documents that have changed. And if you have any more questions, feel free to reach out.
Yeah, keep them coming. We'll have more time at the end as well to answer additional questions. Okay. So there's two common questions we already kind of preloaded into this presentation that we want to make sure that we cover. And one of the most common questions that comes up, and I even just had this just yesterday, is, wait, when we put data into ChatGPT, doesn't that become part of the global training set? Doesn't that influence and essentially become part of what everyone else has access to? And in the context of the public ChatGPT, that is absolutely correct. When you are using the public ChatGPT experience and you're typing information into that experience, it's becoming something that's part of that kind of global learning that they're doing. However, when you're deploying the OpenAI models, ChatGPT included, into your Azure environment, that is not part of that. It is your data, and it is only your data. So there's a service boundary inside the resource group that says, this is your data. It's a copy of the model. Only you get to see that data. Only you get to, it's your trained information. The API calls, the results, everything that comes out of it is operate under the same context of everything else you have in Azure. So if you've built out your landing zones and your governance and your encryption requirements and your this and that, your tagging, your cost management, that all sits inside the context of that broader Azure environment, and it is your data only. Now, there's one thing you should be aware of. When you are going through the process of provisioning the OpenAI service, you know that form that Alessandro gave that says, here's the things you have to put in your use case and what you're going to be doing with it and why and what kind of data and so on and so forth. And one of the reasons for that is certainly, Microsoft protecting themselves. But the other reason for it is there's a certain degree to which they're trying to ensure that the service is used for good things, things that are going to provide value and not things that are going to be tied to abuse. So, there's a little bit of a gating process there before it gets allowed through, especially now when there's, a lot of demand for this. However, there's an element of the platform that if abuses are detected, like let's say you're putting something through the system that really just should never be, something we as a humanity would agree that this is just completely unacceptable. There's an alerting system that creates a human review on that prompt that then a person at Microsoft, this is a Microsoft person, would then be reviewing to determine if A, it's being used for no good, or B, if this is a system problem that it shouldn't be, that the system should be adjusted to be able to facilitate that not being understood to be something that should not be allowed through as sort of threat material. And there's a kind of increasing specificity of what this is. So there's some documents and such that are starting to be written on that particular question, as this sort of idea of like this ethical aspect of what it means to use this platform, which is really on kind of everyone's minds. Now, for many organizations, that's perfectly acceptable. This idea that like the platform is going to have an alerting system that says, hey, if this is being used for things that are just completely unacceptable, then we're going to indicate that as a response, a misuse scenario. However, you can turn this off. So you can request that these two elements get turned off within your system via a request within the environment. So that is something that you can elect to be excluded from if that's a concern for your organization. Not necessarily something I would suggest being excluded from, because that's something that we should all really be investing in, but it is an ability for us to opt out. So if that is a concern for your organization and you feel you have a high confidence in what you're building and it's not something that's going to be creating those kinds of problems, you can opt out of the sort of privacy concern part of that. So then truly, this is only your data and it is not being used for anyone else. Nobody else has access to it. In this context, the alerting system might be a scenario where someone could see a request, but this is certainly a scenario that you can actually opt out of as well. So if you have additional questions on that, we can answer them at the end here. But I think this is a really important thing for your organizations to understand, because the idea that what's special about you is going to suddenly become something that everyone else has access to is completely unacceptable to our organizations, because it's what is our competitive advantage. It's our business, it's our model, it's the language of who we are. So the idea that this is maintained privately is really important. The second question that was had is just how is OpenAI priced? Truly, it is a kind of consumption-based model. The idea that everything that you do within the platform has a cost, and that cost ranges based upon the complexity of the model. So as you think probably the best way to say this is use the least expensive model possible to get the correct answer. And that's where you saw Alessandro combining multiple models to be able to do the work. So rather than asking DaVinci a question that Ada could answer, let's have Ada answer the question because it's less expensive and it's focused on that particular scenario. If I'm doing something with code, I should probably be doing Codex rather than using Ada. So there's these examples of where the right model for the right problem has a lower cost than using a more generalized model that can solve multiple things. So as you kind of go up in the expense level, the model becomes broader and more capable of doing a lot of things, but you might not need to use that model to solve a specific problem. So you can see there's a pretty broad range, like from this level of Ascent to Ascent, or from the context of model training per hour or model hosting per hour. Now, ultimately, these don't seem like big numbers, but then once you start throwing a lot of data at it, it's consummate to the amount of problems you're solving. And that's, I think, what's really exciting about this is the idea that if I'm delivering value, the incremental cost associated with that value can make sense. But what's important to know is that you can implement rate limits and additional budgets, especially budget alerts on your models. So if someone's playing around and they're just kind of going nuts and they're running up tabs that they shouldn't be running up, you can put rate limits in that already exist from the context of developers. You don't actually even have to put them in. And then you have the ability to apply budgets to your environment to say, this is what I'm going to spend on this. I'm not going to be spending more than it for the context of me doing training and testing and piloting. This is how I'm going to kind of box it in. So there's a lot of kind of number ranges here. We're not going to go into all of them because it'd probably take all day. There's a really nice FAQ on breaking this down, but ultimately, when you're doing a project like this, you have to understand the model you're going to be using or a combination of models. And then you can pretty efficiently figure out what am I going to be throwing at it so I can understand what it's going to cost. And it puts me in a position where I can have a better expectation where I'm not just saying to the business, trust me, everything's going to be fine. You're putting yourself in a position where you can have a certain degree of ability to box it in, constrain it, and have an expectation of what each costs. And if you have questions about this, put them in the chat and we'll hit them at the end here. So I wanted to also hit on how companies are getting started. Like, okay, cool. This is all exciting stuff. We're seeing some really powerful capabilities here. We know we want to use it in our business. We're not exactly sure how. How do we get going? So the number one way that we're seeing companies get started is, and they haven't already kind of narrowed in on an idea, is to do a group envisioning session. We've been running these from about 5 to 100 people. And the goal of these kinds of group envisioning sessions is to get a cross-functional group of people together where there's sponsorship for the business and you're starting with the art of the possible. A lot of things we just showed, right? What we showed is like art of the possible stuff. This is real stuff in customers. Here's some things that are examples. Here's how you get going. These are art of the possible capabilities. Now we want to make it real. We can show that same content to your people to get them thinking about the capabilities. Many people are already thinking about this. Many companies are coming in already with their idea because they've been so inspired by just playing around with things like ChatGPT and DALL-E and other things. So start with that art of the possible. And then we're asking them to bring back the why and the what. Start with why. Like, why does my customer care? Answer the so what, who cares? And then the what. I don't necessarily need the ROI yet. I just want the ideas. I want the ideas free flowing. Bring back those ideas of what are powerful things that you can do for your customers or your internal employees that are going to deliver value, transformative value. And then you bring all these ideas back and you rank the ideas and you vote. And you put yourself in a position where you can say, here's the ones that I think are going to have more value. Here's the ones that are going to have less value. And start to put those into boxes where you can use the power of the cross-functional team to come up with ideas that you wouldn't have gotten individually and bring back not only just the ideas, but also the excitement of the organization harnessing this capability to deliver value. So, one of the things that I hear from many organizations is what's happening to my job? What's happening to the work I'm going to be doing every day? There's a certain amount of like kind of fear associated with some of these AI platforms. And by doing this, it starts to get that sponsorship across those groups because they see that this is not necessarily replacing them, it's augmenting them, it's delivering more value. Think about the scenario we had with the chat experience of quoting. That's making a person more productive. Think about what Microsoft just released this week with Copilot for Office. Now using Excel, I have AI capabilities built right into Excel, Word, Outlook, these experiences that are making me more productive, not just replacing me. These opportunities for me to be able to do more and serve my customers in a more effective way. So this is a really great way to get started. Second way is if you've already figured out a scenario, but you need to figure out how I take it to the next step. So there's really 3 elements that we found are critical to moving forward with any AI scenario. And we've been burned by this and we've won by it. The first is the availability of data. The availability of data is critical to you achieving the outcome that we're trying to achieve. If you don't have the data available, it becomes a major blocker to us getting that forward movement. And this doesn't mean like you need a data estate. You need all this cloud data estate built out. A lot of times, this is the driver to build out data estate capabilities based upon a small sliver of that data. So don't think about like, I need to wait for Godot for my data environment to be in place for me to be able to get any value. The big question is, do you have some data that helps to serve for this scenario? So like where we have a customer conversation where they want to do like repair scenarios, like helping people to understand how to repair certain types of trucks. So, okay, cool. I've got the manuals, I've got the assets for that specific scenario. So it's available. Second is there a return on investment? If I do this, will it deliver value? The scenarios that we talked about earlier for all those companies, it's delivering value. It's either bringing more revenue to the table, or it's driving better customer experience, more sticking power with the customers, or it's delivering operational savings. Will it have return on investment? Because ultimately, once you get done with the pilot, you want to know that it's going to drive into something that's value for the organization. And then the third is sponsorship. You need someone who's willing to say, this is an idea that I'm going to get behind to try. And this really what it comes down to. You're going to try something. And the companies that try, fail, try again, succeed are going to be the ones that are winning, because they're the ones that are going to drive innovation and opportunity in their business. You can't run from this. You can't run from it in your career. You can't run from it in your business. This is an opportunity that we have to respond to. Our customers are going to demand this type of capability from us because our competitors are already going to be doing it. It's fantastic what we have the opportunity to achieve. Really combining these three elements, availability of data, return on investment, and sponsorship, are the critical elements of making this real. So then you get into pilot, which is ultimately all the requirements of the number two, and then tying that into a constrained timeline. This is not something you want to move out 3-4 months. This is a month and a half kind of time frame where you want to say, I have the data. Here's what I want to prove. Here's the ROI if I prove it. Here's where we take it afterward. Let's make sure it actually works. Realistic first goals. Sometimes it means you don't get everything that you want, but you get enough of what you want for you to prove that it's the right thing to do, and that you're going to achieve success for your business. And this is truly also where you need to have an understanding of what that success means. That success is clear and measurable, testable at the end of this project. That we can say, yes, this did what we thought it was going to do and was successful. And if you enter into that with too much diversity, it puts you in a position where you're struggling to know whether yet you got there or not. This is an opportunity. Pilots are really an opportunity for you to say, here's what I want to be able to prove. Let's prove it against this data. Let's go try it. Then tied to this, you want to have next steps after understood. Now, sometimes those next steps can't be like totally locked in until you've proven that you can actually do it, right? You're piloting it to say, this is how it works. I get success. Something happens afterward. But you want to have this idea that if this is successful, here's how I would take it forward. Because again, your competitors are trying to do the same things. So then you're moving into what we call production iteration, brick by brick. You're bringing it to the table, you're iterating, you're iterating, you're iterating. This is what we've learned from these projects, is that it's never a one-time deal. It's an iteration on the work that you built for your customer to be able to create more and more value. That first project we did, moving to the second project, to the third project, you saw how it accelerated the time to market. This idea of what we can do now versus what we can do then still has brick by brick. What you would do is you pick that initial scenario, you serve it, you add on to it, you add on to it, you add on to it, you deliver more value, and you measure it. And this has really been an interesting thing, the sort of measurable impact part of this. Many of the companies we've worked with in this space, they weren't able to measure the productivity or the success of a thing before they started this project. Like the number of quotes that they did with the quoting engine, or the successful requests that their customer service reps were able to respond to, or the time to respond, and the happiness of their customers really wasn't measured at the same extent to which we can now measure it at by also layering in this additional capability. And then when you're going into production, ultimately operationalization is really important. Is the ML ops story that Alessandro talked to earlier, that this becomes a production part of your service that you're delivering to customers. And some of them, that's why they started with, like, you know, a common question on this sort of email scenarios is, why do they even keep going with email? Well, A, it's how the customer prefer to interact. Got to meet the customer where they're at. B, it gives us a model where we can improve our model by using it in conjunction with a human. And as there's people who want to just use an asynchronous chatbot, they can onboard to that once the model's fully ready for that. So you can start to iterate in ways where you sort of build in the protections that allow for the mistakes a platform might make, but then you also start to then get to a point where you can plug the customer right into the data platform itself. So each of these represent an ability to take this into next steps, and then we'll stop and we'll take any other remaining questions. We believe that this is an opportunity for every business to transform their mission and deliver it through technology, augment their company through technology. And we are offering to do group envisioning sessions or evaluation of a specific scenario for anyone that wants to do that as a complimentary service to you. And then driving from that, we're seeing people moving into pilots that make that real. So when you answer the survey today, pick one of those and we will work with you. This team that's on this call will work with you to either do that envisioning session or evaluate a specific scenario and pull that forward into how it could be something that's piloted and prove it and make it real in your business. So this is a tremendous opportunity and we love to do it in a way that delivers value for you. So let's pause here and let's answer some additional questions. And you feel free to come off mute if you want to answer some questions or put them in the chat.
Hey, first of all, thanks for the great presentation. It was really valuable. You shared a lot of rich information with demos and the effort, and a lot of these technologies came recently, so I appreciate sharing this. I think one question we have posted in the chat, I think Ethan and a few others have posted, was on retraining the model. If you can give a little more insights and details about how easy it is. And also the second question was about the low-code platform what Microsoft has, how reliable that was. I know it was published recently. So I think those two, if you can expand a little more on what it takes to retrain the model. Is that a manual operation or is it automated? And then what it takes. Thank you.
Excellent. Yeah, I can comment on the retraining. So the retraining means, and really is fine tuning. So you start with a base model that's been trained on the internet. And then let's say you have your initial, they recommend at least 500 prompts to fine tune, but it can be as high as you like. Let's say we have 1,000 prompts. We go ahead, we fine tune that model. And what's going to happen is you're now going to have a new copy of that model in your resource that is different than any other. And you can call on that to then perform the operations you like. So let's say we want to do retraining. Let's say we got more data based on what we found about this. What's going to happen is you're not going to take the base model and retrain on both groups of data. You can actually take the already fine-tuned model that was already fine-tuned on your initial data and just do another fine-tuning run with your additional data. So that's how the workflow is that the more data that comes in, you can just fine-tune the previous copy of your GPT model so that you don't have to do full loads all the time. Now, to address the point of automation, if in some way you have in your system an automated way to detect faults, and what I mean by that is if someone is interacting with this, and not only they can flag when the model got something incorrect, but they can also either correct it directly or their actions allow us to correct that indirectly, then that enables the automatic retraining of this model. So it's not the engineering part of getting the automated retraining is not difficult. The difficulty part with automatic retraining is data validation that you're seeing in production. And if you can solve that, then yes, you can absolutely auto-train these things.
Great to know. Thank you. What's the, if I can ask a follow-up question, what's the traditional approach? Is it like either Apple Siri takes the feedback or Google Assistant? Do they handle that manually? Do they take the manual validation before they manually retrain? I think what I understood from you is you don't have to train the whole model. It is incremental. You only have to feed in what's new and updated. But then the question is like, what's the traditional, and again, I'm not from a data science background, have minimal understanding of it. So what's the traditional approach? Is it done manually, or is that the right approach, or automation, is that applicable for this kind of scenarios?
Yeah, that's a great question. That really is dependent on two things. It's the kind of data that you have and the kind of the whole system that is supporting this machine learning model. So if you have data that is simple, as in, the output is a yes or a no, that's much easier to validate than if a model is outputting 33 independent fields and each field is its own string. So that's one aspect. So, and then the second aspect is this model supposed to be dealt with manually through a code interface, or is this plugged into a full functioning front-end web app the way we showed today? To answer your long answer short, it is impossible to tell what is the there's no normal here. The case of data validation and retraining really depends on a case-by-case basis. Every now and then we do encounter, as in this team is very experienced with the automated coding scenario, for instance. We have learned how to approach that in a very normalized way now. But if you had something that is a workflow that's much, much different, there's not necessarily there's a cook your own book recipe cook your own cake recipe of how to do these things doesn't really exist, unfortunately.
No problem. Thank you so much. The second question was on the low-code platform. So the Lewin's demo about the, I'm sure the summer is coming, so we're ready to try the lawnmower. So the was that the window-based? You had an image processing-based example. So was that built using the low-code platform, or what was it built on? And the second question was primarily around low-code platform, that how reliable that is and how easy it is to develop. Is it comparable to the Alexa development we have seen, and like high level? If you see that the human interaction or ChatGPT done is in simplest form, is that it used the words which are more human friendly in that one packet. What Alexa and Google Assistant done is converting that text to voice, and voice to text was free. All you have to do is feed in your own private data. To Nathan's point about you, what is that they don't understand? So is the low-code platform giving any of those framework support to fast or accelerate the development?
Yeah, in the case of our demo that we were looking at earlier, right, it actually has a number of components that comes together. One of them is the bot framework itself as well, that intercepts and translates and send the API back to the GPT demo that we are looking at, right? In this case, a different model itself. So in this particular case, you actually have a number of connection points. It's not one specific bot that you're looking at. You're looking at a number of different interactive bots. In order for you to actually get to the level of sophisticated answers, right, that connects, especially with a UI that you've done around as well, right? It's not easy, one simple. ChatGPT doesn't do everything for you, unfortunately, right? We have to actually put it all together, and this is the potential outcome of it. I'm happy to actually sit down and actually give you more details on it, as well. In terms of low-code platform, I'll leave that specifically to ChatGPT. Right? I'll leave it to Alessandro to answer. In the past, right, every Microsoft low-code platforms that came along has been very stable, which is what I answered in the chat for you. Alessandro, do you have any comments for the local platform for GPT in that area?
Yeah, so it really depends on what your architecture looks like. We can make, so as far as serving these models from a production environment, you can either have an application call the models directly through an API call. What we've found, it is useful to allow a Kubernetes container to call this, because as data comes in, we can combine even the the demo I showed today, it has two GPT calls. So in this case, we would probably tackle it as a Kubernetes endpoint, and then that container would then call the two individual models. So it really is need dependent, and it really is architecture dependent. What you have to work with, what you need to do, and what you want to do with these things or can do with this thing.
That's great. Thank you. Yeah. I know we have focused on Microsoft tools. Are there competitors? Are there tools available from OpenAI itself?
So all of the models that we can spin as a copy in Azure are also available through the Azure OpenAI endpoint. But what you get with going with the Azure solution is that the service agreements that enterprises already have established with Microsoft about all of their cloud offerings also applies to OpenAI, and it also applies to all of the data that you're going to use to train. And as Nathan showed with the containerization diagram, it is Microsoft's containerization of this technology that really enables us technologists to leverage this technology with any data, regardless if it is private or HIPAA or PII. That is not a guarantee that you would get by going to OpenAI directly.
Coming off mute. I was going to emphasize that there is clearly a you get an advantage, right, on data security that we talked about. There was a deck on the presentation that talked exactly about the fact that if you are on Microsoft platform, right, that uses this OpenAI, your data and your models are contained within that versus a generally available OpenAI, right, from OpenAI itself. We cannot guarantee that level of security for that models that you will be putting up there, right?
Okay, let's maybe two more questions, then we'll probably wrap it. So, any more questions out there?
This is Hans Montoya. I have a quick question about data security, specifically in the medical field for medical applications. Like what kind of protocols are applied to that, like in this kind of solutions?
So there's a number. I think all the calls that are made to the Azure OpenAI resources and all the responses are their REST API calls, or they're encrypted. And the way that the architecture is designed, if it's data that is already sitting on a storage container, for example, or a database that is in Azure today, that gets the same level of security that anything that you will send into the Azure OpenAI resource has the same level of security that you enjoy today with your storage accounts, databases, Synapse, data factories. I mean, the list goes on. I hope did that answer your question?
Absolutely. Thank you.
Okay.
Great.
Yeah, I think if I would
Thank you.
I think if I would layer onto that a couple other pieces of information just from an availability standpoint, in addition to being encrypted in transit and at rest, your governance controls that you put in place through something like Azure Policy would be inherited down to that environment. So, you may have like a lot of innovation happening around this, and you can put controls in place that say like certain things, like the storage account encryption, for example, could be applied via policy in the context of your landing zone. So it just gets inherited. So there's some things like basically the same way that you would apply to any other workload. The only other thing I would note here is that, this isn't so much the case for like medical, but we do have some customers in GovCloud. And I think what most people in GovCloud have come to expect is that the services are not yet available to them. So there'll be some lagging capabilities for the GovCloud scenarios versus the commercial cloud scenarios. So GovCloud can't even use it yet. But commercial cloud, there's regions that are lighting up that have access to this.
Fantastic. And just a follow-up question, unrelated to my original question, but what are the kind of limitations in terms of processing capability of this OpenAI model, specifically as this becomes more and more popular on many and multiple applications as we just saw today? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
That's a fantastic question. So everything that we showed today was GPT-3. And GPT-4 was just announced last week, the week before. Not only that, you're also having very large language models being published in the Hugging Face Hub every single day now. So the limitation today that I've personally noticed is around when you need to index things with a very, very large when your index information is across multiple pages of documents, that's a limitation. However, that limitation is only applicable to today. GPT-4 will be great because their window for processing information is going to be much larger. So short story is the limitations that we find today are very small compared to what they were about a year ago. And a lot of these limitations are temporary for what we're seeing.
Yeah. Awesome, thanks.
Awesome. So I think we'll wrap it here. We're really thankful for you sticking around asking questions, and we're looking forward to talking with you next. If you want access to the deck or the recording, fill out the form, and we hope you have a fantastic rest of the day and a great start into AI.
Excellent. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Have a nice day.
Thanks, all.